Hello, I'm Paul Glumaz. Today is the 29th of July, and uh, this is being brought to you by General Welfare Presents. Um, I want to take a look with you at the new paradigm that is in motion around the world that is not being reported to you in any way. And a lot of you are kind of wondering also about the confusion about the term free trade. The Chinese use the term free trade. The British use the term free trade. Trump uses the term free trade, fair trade, tariffs. And a lot of people are saying that Trump's proposal to have the free movement of goods between the United States and the EU, the European Union, which was being discussed with the head of the EU, Claude Juncker, is nothing but a consolidation of a free trade bloc of the US and Europe and Japan against China, Russia, and the Belt and Road. I do not believe that that is necessarily what is happening. It may be what some would wish to happen, but it is at best ambiguous. The question is, what is the intention? The Adam Smith modern neoliberal system of free trade means something totally different than in the current Chinese state-directed credit system of free trade. The difference between free trade and the directed investment system is different in a financial speculative system. One is imperial and is based on the maximum rate of return on a speculative financial investment. The other is developmental and is based on the greatest increase of the activation of the development of manufacturers and the division of labor. So they're two different things. They both are calling themselves free trade, but they're two different things. Now, Alexander Hamilton's model still applies today. He, in his third report on the development of manufacturers, is at the key of the idea of the directed credit system that the Chinese had, that the U.S. had at one time. And it is the most revolutionary economic idea until LaRouche came along with the idea of increased relative potential population density as the way you measure economic development. What Alexander Hamilton develops is that you transform an agricultural population into an industrial population through the development of manufacturers, which increases the division of labor and which provides new technologies and new capabilities to the agricultural sector, which then makes agriculture more productive and more efficient and less labor intensive, and therefore you have more people to go into manufacturing. This is the cornerstone of the modern Chinese system, whereas the other cornerstone is the imperial system of neoliberal free trade speculative operations. Now, the greatest Hamiltonian revolution is going on before your very eyes that you are not being told, that you are not aware of, is in the scope of its impact on humanity, is going on in Africa. And you don't know anything about it. And I'm telling you now because you don't know anything about it. Okay, Africa has 1.3 billion people. When Obama went to South Africa last, he gave a speech in which he said that if Africa developed U.S. standards of living, the planet will boil over. That was his view of the Africans, that they should not develop. They should stay the way they were, or worse. Talk about racism. I mean, that's extreme. And according to National Security Study Memorandum, which was declassified in the late 80s from 1974, the policy of the United States secretly has been to prevent development in places like Africa because it would lead to greater population and greater exploitation of resources, the resources that were limited and which should be controlled by those who already are developed. This Malthusian view is that beggar thy neighbor is at the core of the imperial system and the justification for an imperial system. So how does this system work? Well, you have essentially piracy and insurance costs. You have pirates, and then you have to pay the insurance. And this is how you build up a financial speculative system. This is how they did it. And then you have organized crime, you have drug trafficking, you have speculation, plunder, and slavery. And you make profit, but you don't develop. You exploit. You use up the land, you use up the people, and so forth. What is now coming together at the just concluded BRICS summit, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa summit in South Africa, St. Johannesburg, is the application of Hamilton's development of manufacturers to the entire continent of Africa. The transformation of Africa is where the battle for the new paradigm is being won and will be won in physical terms. Putin announced at that conference that Russia will provide nuclear power plants to all of Africa and will help develop with their oil industry capabilities, the oil and gas capabilities in Africa in places like Gabon, Mozambique, and Angola. Xi, in his speech to the new BRICS, saying that there has to be massive leapfrogging of science and technology and that Africa has the right to access all of this for their development. That there should be no country should be not allowed to have the right to have the maximum development. India is now becoming partners with China in developing Africa. So China can help build the dams and the railway with India, and Russia can build the nuclear power plants. Japan is coming in as well. Turkey was at the conference. Erdogan from Turkey was at the conference too, and he's becoming more active in the orientation of the Chinese and the Russians and the Belt and Road. So, and we have a new land bridge report that goes into this. Now, the secondary aspect of the industrial development of Africa is ending the refugee crisis in Europe, because who wants to go to Europe if they see a future in Africa? So the poverty combined with the hopelessness, combined with the recruitment to these mercenary armies, child armies, all these armies, this has been the new form of colonialism in Africa for the last 30 years. And this is what's driving people all over the world. And this has also been brought to you by the Middle East. This is neoliberalism in its real form, not in its ideological form, but in its actual form. I can't begin to get across the horror of the elite in the West, the oligarchy, the neoliberal elite, at the idea that Africa is going to be industrialized. You have no idea. This is worse than putting a stake in Dracula's heart. From the time of the Arab slave trade through the European slave trade and the plantation economies of the colonial period is what destroyed the positive elements of European mercantile civilization and colonization. It destroyed it. Africa was the poster child for racism. They didn't have the genes. That's why they never developed. They're backward. They're genetically backward. This was the belief of everybody in the Western world until recently, until Hitler lost World War II. And then you have the liberal guilt about what happened to Africa and slavery and all of that. Those people never get over their guilt. They don't want to, but they don't want to develop Africa. All these liberals that feel guilty don't want them to have industrial development. I don't understand that, and I'm not going to try to explain it here. Africa is an energy of development which is taking off. You cannot raise the world's living standards without developing Africa. Africa has got the greatest potential because their population can rapidly develop, and their population's contribution to the world economy can become like the new China. It literally can. This is the greatest transformation of human history. And now, the Chinese aren't playing games, okay? They want to develop Africa because they understand that developing Africa is the cornerstone to ridding the world of poverty on a global scale by the year 2050, which is one of the stated aims of the 19th Party Congress. In September, there will be the first African summit in which Xi Jinping will receive 52 heads of states from Africa to discuss the development of Africa. and the Organization of African Unity. That is what's going on, folks. That's not what you're being told about. Your conception of the world is that you've been presented about Africa is about to go through profound change. And let me tell you something. Most liberals, most elites are horrified. What? You can't do that. You shouldn't be allowed to do that. All these, people that cry about, racism, they don't want Africa to be developed. You figure that one out. Now let's talk about tariffs. Why would you have tariffs? Why would anyone have tariffs? To protect your manufacturing. Okay? You want to develop your manufacturing, so you have tariffs because those manufacturers are being imported from somewhere else. Someone else is being paid for those imports. And the reason you're doing that is because you don't have the capability to do it. So let's say you want to develop the capability to do that. So you have tariffs on the imports. But what about the people who are exporting to you? What are they going to do now that they can't export to you? Who's going to? How are they going to work? And that's the whole issue of tariff wars. You can have tariff wars, but it's a zero-sum game. So now you develop a manufacturers to replace the imports, but you're not importing from them, then they can't import from you. But let's say the more developed country economically, instead of trying to take advantage of its cheaper productive capabilities by undercutting or preventing competition, decided to increase its economy by developing its less developed neighbors. Then why would you have tariffs? You're creating greater industrial development, greater development in all these areas. You're developing a country, and you're developing yourself to develop a country, and then they are developing themselves to develop other countries. And the whole increase in the division of labor and increase of trade goes with it. So why would you want to have tariffs? So this is the issue. So who is Trump really fighting when he pushes tariffs? Is he fighting China? Is he fighting Europe? Is he fighting Canada? Is he fighting Mexico? Or is he just trying desperately to get jobs in the United States because jobs have been gone away? What happened? Well, we no longer need to be manufacturers. We're a service economy. We provide the money. What do you mean you provide the money? We provide the IT. We provide the services. Other nations can produce the goods, and we provide the service. You mean the dollars? Yes, the dollars. Well, why would they want your dollars? You're not giving them anything in return. Well, we're giving them services. What do you mean by services? We're giving them financial services. Well, what do you mean by that? They're getting dollars. And they have to have dollars in order to buy anything anywhere in the world. Why? Because the dollar is the unit of monetary unit that is the universal currency. Well, why is it the universal currency? Because it's tied to the oil production. And also there are all these fleets of carriers and threats of nuclear war and all of that to back it up. You don't want to accept the dollar as your primary international currency? Well, guess what? We got a whole lot of things we can do to you, your country. You don't want to recognize the dollar? We can do a lot to you. So that's why the dollar works. That's why you get all this stuff from all over the world. And we have a massive trade deficit. So, so Trump was saying the other day, I don't understand why are people saying we don't need manufacturing anymore. Well, Donald, you should know. That's because we are in an empire and we don't have to manufacture and we don't want to manufacture because that means we got to pay our people, decent salaries. So he's having to come to grips with this issue. Now, China in November will have its first import expo in Shanghai. And they call it a move to firmly support trade liberalization and open its market. They're counting on 130 countries being there, 2,800 companies, and 150,000 buyers in and outside of China and abroad. So what is this? Okay, so what's going on here? The Chinese idea of free trade is very different. It's trade without speculation. The other system of free trade that we've been under is you got to get dollars, and you got to at an unfair in order to trade. So you have a cost of doing trade, which goes to the speculators. And that's why you can't get a fair trade, because you can't have fair trade, because in order to do trade, you got to use dollars. In order to use dollars, you got to go, you have to have, your currency is at a below what you're at a negative. Well, so what about this dollar system? Well, I'm going to be blunt with you. It's being replaced. Guess what? It's being replaced. And you know what's replacing it? The process of developing Africa in the way that China, Russia, India, and the BRICS nations are now doing is the process also that replaces the dollar-based financial system. Ultimately, each nation will have a clearinghouse. Okay, so an exporter exports to a country products. It gets paid in the currency of that country. The exporter takes that currency back to their own country, and the clearinghouse gives that exporter back, converts that currency back into the currency of his own country, where he can use it, where the exporter can use it. Where's the speculation? Where's the $4 trillion a day of speculative activity? You realize $4 trillion is speculative currency speculation, and only 2% is involved in trade and services. 98% is pure speculation. What kind of system is that? You're getting screwed every which way. Who's screwing you? The bankers. Who's screwing you? The speculators. Who's getting screwed? The nations. Now, the system that's emerging, and everyone is now beginning, from Putin to you name it, is now beginning for the first time to call for a new financial architecture, just like Clinton did in '98 before Lewinsky, and just like LaRouche has been doing for a long time. In this system, this system is similar to the original Bretton Woods, although you wouldn't necessarily use gold. And this is what I think the Chinese and the Russians are actually moving to, and this is what they mean by free trade. They mean free of the cost of speculations. And this is the new financial architecture. And this is where we're going, and this is what's going to allow for the world to develop very rapidly, with Africa leading the way. And you'll have a massive expansion of the division of labor, the massive increase in new technologies. And guess what? The U.S. under the current system can't even build a railroad, can't build bridges. This is what Trump said. We spent $7 trillion in these wars, or more actually, and we didn't get anything out of it. Well, yeah, you spent $7 trillion to keep the dollar financial system in the way it is, so the speculators could make a killing, and they all went bankrupt in 2008. The too big to fail, too big to jail are now on life support from the taxpayers and the central banks. So when are we going to get rid of these people? So this is what's being discussed. So the more sanctions you put on Russia, the more trade war you have with China, which is not the solution. The solution is to develop Africa and create a massive increase of volume of trade. Develop Latin America, which is what, by the way, the new president of Mexico, Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador, AMLO, is talking to Trump about right now. He takes office on December 1st. And then you have Jeremy Corbyn's address to the industrialists in Britain, saying we got to reindustrialize Great Britain, and that means a lot a lot of regulations on the City of London and an end to the tax havens. That's Corbyn. He's waiting in the wings to become Prime Minister of Great Britain. But you don't have so that's the significance of African development. We have now reached a point where China, Russia, the BRICS, India have the potential to go to a new financial system. Now, this is what is freaking out the institutions, the establishment. This is what's really freaking them out. And Donald Trump has not demonstrated that he is willing to go to war to protect the system. And they are desperate. So this brings me now to the consequences of what happened on Monday, July 16th, coming out of the summit and the press conference between Putin and Trump. Up until July 16th, it wasn't known for sure if Donald Trump would take the step he did in establishing 4 channels of communication between the U.S. and Russia. Terrorism, national security, cybersecurity, and policy. Except for military discussions, all channels of communication had broken down, and we were in the worst relationship with Russia we've ever been in. Worse. And Donald Trump's, what Donald Trump did at the conference was not, at that summit with Putin, had nothing to do with any deal. There was no deal. It was simply, we're opening up channels of communication so we can talk. Why? Because we don't want a nuclear war, because that's where it was heading. And of course, the option of winning with a nuclear war for the West ended on March 1st when Putin unveiled the new weapon system. So there's no way you're going to win a nuclear war. He has new principal weapon systems that are defensive in nature and offensive in nature. And only in Russia can you get a bunch of engineers. They can put together design, they can put together a team, they can put together the manufacturing and get it done for 1/100th of the cost, or 1/10 of the cost of what we do it here. And they don't have all this crap in between. So everything was done to prevent the meeting with Trump. The Skripal affair, the staged chemical attack of the White Helmets, the indictment of 12 Russians and that NRA girl, spy, and then all of the senators, Democratic senators, and McCain wanted him to cancel the meeting. And then the Washington Post went berserk over the fact that he was threatening the special relationship with Great Britain, which is not a special relationship between the U.S. and Great Britain. It's a special relationship between Wall Street and the City of London. Then you saw Trump at the press conference, and when they tried to pin him down, he talked about the servers, basically saying, "Where's the evidence?" That was the turning point. This is the turning point for Trump. Because by saying that and answering the questions that way, in that context, he has crossed the line. And now there's no middle ground. He has to be removed. Trump has shown his hand. And we have now crossed into a revolutionary dual power situation in the U.S. as of July 16th. My sense is that we've gone past the point of no return. Trump is either removed and the U.S. for all intents and purposes is terminated as a constitutional republic, or the oligarchy running the world will be crushed by the new paradigm. The U.S. military capabilities and war is their last hope, and it isn't going to work. So that's the revolutionary situation we are in. So what is a dual power situation? You have two sides in control of power in a yet to be determined situation of which one will end up ruling. Which has a lot to do with why Bolton said that we're going to postpone the next summit with Putin until this issue has been resolved, till the Russia situation has been resolved. So you have the media, Hollywood, Congress, Justice Department, the intelligence community, the British, Obama, all of that mobilizing to remove Obama. And on the other side, you have a large percentage of Trump's 53.2 million Twitter followers, former Democrats, libertarians, evangelicals, with the international situation, with Putin providing the military anvil and Xi Jinping the economic hammer of a survivable alternative economic system. So that is where we are. And so we are in a revolutionary situation, and it's unfolding very rapidly. with the U.S. population taking sides, which we will see how it materializes in the election 3 months from now.